NFL job openings here, Sam. Not only are there several head coach jobs still available, sounds like John Harbaugh is going back to school. A lot of head coaching jobs, but also a lot of offensive coordinator jobs that are open right now. Chargers, Titans, Patriots, Jets, Rams, Commanders, maybe the Bucs if some of the rumors are true about Byron Leftwich. Look at it. Like, these are, not only are they jobs, but there's a very attractive one at the top, the Los Angeles Chargers, right? A lot of people want that one because I want to work with Justin Herbert.
Right.
But the Patriots with Mac Jones there, the Jets, who you just said, there's a pretty good situation there. They got to figure out.
They're now interviewing Nathaniel Hackett for that job.
Are they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they got, they'll figure out quarterback.
It's just
the Jets.
Like, there's anything in the world scream like bad process more than, look, somebody had to get fired because we didn't do what we needed to do. So now we're going to downgrade from Mike LaFleur to Nathaniel Hackett. Like,
is that a downgrade though? Hackett's,
yes,
he's been an okay offensive coordinator,
right?
With Aaron Rodgers, he's been better with Rodgers. Mike LaFleur, the rumors are he'd be going to the Rams though. That rumor's already out there that Sean McVay wants to bring in Mike LaFleur. There's rumors about our old friend Zach Robinson potentially getting a look from the Chargers, going across town, which would be awesome, right? We'll see what ends up coming up there. But the Chargers one, I know there's head coaching jobs to discuss, but the offensive coordinator thing is fascinating because this is what the league is wanting, right? They want the next young mind, and those are the guys that were getting all the head coaching opportunities for a while. And there's a lot of coordinator jobs out there right now.
Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, who I've been talking up a lot this season, has removed himself from job discussions, head coaching job discussions. Like, he's obviously not going to jump from one offensive coordinator position to another, but he's basically told whatever remaining teams are there that he's not interested in a head coaching gig. He's going to go back to the Lions, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty young too, and I think it's such an interesting world, right? Because there are people who interviewed for, say, GM jobs 3 or 4 years ago who don't get interviewed anymore.
Right.
And it was either because they didn't interview well, or they weren't the right fit, or they're actually not good enough to be a GM, or something to that effect, or they just kind of like lost a little bit of momentum, right? This is where momentum actually matters. Momentum might not happen in a game, but it actually matters, I think, in the job market, right? So if you're a team that was hot 4 years ago, I mean, look at Byron Leftwich a year ago at this time.
Yes.
He was essentially handed the Jaguars head coaching job, but he didn't want Trent Baalke there. So Byron Leftwich goes from hot head coaching candidate because his offense was incredible. In 2020, they win a Super Bowl. 21's the best offense in the league. Byron Leftwich, head coaching candidate, to potentially fired as offensive coordinator just a year later.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for, look, everybody would love the right opportunity to come along, but you might not get the right one, and you may be better off taking an opportunity versus letting the opportunity disappear in the first place. Like, there's no guarantee that even if you get better, that the situation around you doesn't deteriorate and you carry the can for that. Like, we've just talking about the fact that these job decisions are often made not on merit. You did a bad job, you're being fired. It's like, no, something happened bad and somebody's getting canned, and you are low enough down the totem pole that you're the guy. Like, you're a scapegoat. You're getting dumped because the head coach isn't getting dumped, and the GM sure as hell isn't getting dumped, so it's you. See ya. Like, that can happen because one random player in your team gets injured, and there's just nothing you could have done about it. Or whatever, like a bunch of other circumstances come together and your offense deteriorates or your defense deteriorates, and you just take the blame for it. So if you're one of these hot offensive or defensive coordinator candidates, again, you'd love the perfect situation, but generally the perfect situation isn't there, and you have to take one of the less perfect ones. And I think you're probably better off taking it, trying to make the most of it, than you are passing it up, waiting for the right opportunity and never getting a shot again.
If you're young like a Ben Johnson, though, I mean, part of it is just interviewing experience. Theoretically, you'll hopefully have opportunities 2 and 3 years down the road, maybe next year, whatever it might be. And part of it is maybe just getting that experience, right? It is pretty important to get out there and understand the process and being a part of it and preparing for it. Some of these guys, D'Amico Ryans, Dan Quinn, they've got 4 and 5 interviews lined up in the middle of trying to game plan right now. This is a new rule over the last couple of years. You used to have to wait for coaches to have their season end. Now you can talk to coaches in the middle of the season. I get both sides of it, right? You don't want a coach who goes, far into the playoffs to get screwed in the process. At the same time, how do coaches prepare?
There's no way. I mean, DeMeco Ryans, I think, had 4 or 5 head coaching interviews this week. There's just no way that doesn't impact game preparation. I understand there's people that help him with the preparation package of these interviews and things. Like, he's not just going in there doing it all himself.
Right.
But even so, like, at some point you have to look at the information in the packet. You also have to hope that information doesn't suck. Otherwise, you're not going to come off particularly well. You have to actually take the time to look at the tape and be able to talk about whoever it is they're going to want to talk. Like, you need to know these things. So there's no possible way that he can be dedicating the same amount of time to the upcoming opponent that somebody who doesn't have that on his plate has.
In an NFL team, when you're interviewing, of course it's extensive, but you want to hear DeMeco Ryans say. You want to hear his philosophy, what he's going to do specifically for your team. How are you going to use these guys? How are you going to do this? How are you going to handle these situations? I don't know if you can do the interview less specific, just talk culture, just talk vision and all that stuff, and not be as specific to the team because a guy like DeMeco Ryans is still in the playoffs. But then how do you compare the interview with him versus somebody who that's all they're doing, right? It's their off season, right? And they come in and they're fully prepared to talk everything about your team because they have the time to do that right now.
I mean, when, I think this is a fair thing to put out there, but when Zach Robinson was talking to the Rams about that job, he went and watched every throw that Jared Goff had the previous season twice, right? And had a giant binder about what they did week to week and how they changed things up and how they, that took an insane amount of time, even with, PFF's video system and the ability to do that in a much more streamlined fashion than other people do. Like, if that's the sort of standard, right? This is what you're expected to be able to do for any team you're talking to in an interview. If you have 5 of those, there's no way. Again, there's just simply no way you can do that and also put the same amount of time into this week's game plan, A, that you did the week before, or B, that your opponent is probably doing. Like, I don't know what the solution is, because I think you're right. It's hard to ask these teams to hold off for potentially another month for these candidates that are in the playoffs. Like, that's a really tough thing to do because everybody else's offseason has been going for a while now. Like, they're working on free agents. They're working on the draft. They need to know what they're doing, right? Like, you need to know what the offense is we're running next year. Yeah. Like, these are important pieces of information. And if you're like, no, we got to sit there for another month just so we can talk to this guy who we may not even end up hiring, it's tough.
Tyler, can we throw those head coaching opportunities out there really quick? I want to let's talk best. You're quick. That's awesome. Best head coaching openings and then best offensive coordinator and why it's the Chargers. Which of these jobs, Cardinals, Panthers, Broncos, Texans, and Colts, what's the best job here?
I think the Broncos is still the best job for a couple of reasons. But it obviously comes with the massive caveat that as the prospective new coach, you need to be 100% sure, A, that you can fix Russell Wilson, and B, how you're going to do it. So, Sean Payton was talking about this on Cowherd, and he was kind of vague about how he'd do it. Like, if I'm hiring for Denver, if I'm in the interview, I need a lot more specifics than that. Like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to look at the things he did well, and then I'm going to ask him what else he likes. And then we're just going to do that. Yeah, I'm going to need more than that, Mr. Payton. As great as your resume is, I'm going to need a little bit more specifics about how you plan to fix Russell Wilson. But if you're convinced that can happen, A, they actually have the quarterback, right? Wilson. We've seen, there was a game this year where he looked good. Previously, we've seen him. He's been one of the best quarterbacks of the last decade. So theoretically, there's a lot to like there at the most important position in the game. The receivers are good. The defense was amazing this year. There's a lot there. Then on a personal level, they're owned by the richest owners in the NFL by an order of magnitude more than anybody else, which has multiple benefits. One, they can pay you whatever it takes, right? If your salary is now $20 million a year, it's not going to be anything to them. B, potentially you can get money out of them to invest in all those cheat code areas where there's no salary cap restricting you. Maybe they can build you an all-star coaching supporting cast. Maybe they can invest in a bunch of other areas that will gain an edge over everybody else. There were reports out there that there's various ways teams are incredibly cheap throughout the NFL. If you don't have an owner that cares about that, if your owner is happy to spend money, it's a better place to work. It's a better place for players who want to come to. It enables you to bring in coaches that other teams don't have a shot at.
So I agree with you that the Broncos are the best coaching job as far as upside goes. And I think that's what you're referring to mostly there. Like, who could have the most success there? It also could be the place where you get fired the quickest. Because if you can't figure out Russell Wilson, it's like, all right, we're going to find the next guy. Because we're still like, Russell Wilson stays, someone else has to go. That's what happened this year, right?
On the other
Russ
hand,
stays, you have to go.
You then get to run the Cliff Kingsbury playbook.
Then you're off to Thailand.
You're a year in to your giant 5-year, $100 and whatever million contract, and you get to spend the next year on a beach.
Yeah, I don't know when I'm coming back. I'll let you know.
I got a one-way ticket.
Take a one-way ticket to Cincinnati. Just hang out with the kids. So I agree on the Broncos. I think the Arizona Cardinals job is the most interesting because, to me, I think you're looking at like who's got the most patience. And the Cardinals, it looks like a full rebuild with Kyler Murray. It's a full rebuild with you just signed Kyler Murray to a long contract, and you might not even have him for next year. That might be the job that's interesting because you can start over, right? Other than quarterback, but that's a good thing, right? The other teams have to look for a quarterback or they have to rejuvenate Russell Wilson. I'd be intrigued by getting the Cardinals back on track almost from scratch and being able to maybe have some patience as well, just because Kyler's going to miss some time next year. As far as the offensive coordinator jobs, we got to talk Chargers here. Joe Lombardi gets fired, and you get to have year 4 of Justin Herbert. That's what you're stepping into. So on one hand, expectations are going to be high. How do you get the most out of this guy? On the other hand, it's like, all right, let's go get this guy to have an average depth of target over 8. Let's just throw the ball down the field. Let's get Justin Herbert to not play the game like Alex Smith. That seems to be certainly the most intriguing offensive coordinator job out there.
Oh, I think this is by far the best. I mean, again, if you're offensive coordinator, your starting point should be who has a quarterback. Do I have a quarterback? What am I working with there? Justin Herbert, okay, Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill, that's not terrible. The Rams, obviously, with Matthew Stafford. The problem there being, I mean, are you really doing things, or is that Sean McVay's running the offense and you're just the guy saying, yes, sir? Like, you being tasked with unlocking the full potential of Justin Herbert is by far the most attractive gig there.
Though the Patriots offensive coordinator job is interesting because they have literally never changed their scheme in over 20 years, right? Since Belichick showed up in the year 2000, same terminology and everything. I can't say what they're using. A lot of stuff. Okay, hand signals, a lot of stuff. Yes, not only terminology, but I know people who knew the hand signals 10, 15 years ago, and it's like, man, when I watch them, I see the same hand signals that we like. It's the same everything, which is fascinating, right? So, but they're interviewing Jaguar great Keenan McCardle for the job. Like, they are the Patriots.
Vikings wide receiver coach.
Bill O'Brien is the most obvious candidate.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't change the offense, right? He ran the offense over 10 years ago, and he was the offensive coordinator for Brady for a couple of years and all that stuff. So they could just go down that path. But it'll be interesting to see if Bill Belichick completely changes things. It's also
no guarantee, by the way, that McCardle would run the sort of West Coast offense that he's been coaching in. I mean, he's been the wide receivers coach. Like,
oh, right.
Doesn't mean like just because he's been doing it in these different systems.
It would be, but not only are they running the same system, but they've never hired from outside the organization, right? They brought Josh McDaniels back in to basically run the same system after he left for a couple of years, right? So they just haven't done that yet. Will they actually think outside the box? They're also, for whatever it's worth, randomly the betting favorite to get Lamar Jackson if Lamar Jackson changes teams, right? Is it a time in Bill Belichick's career where it's like, do I really want to go in with year 3 of Mac Jones? Like, even if he's good, it's like, what can we do with Mac Jones, right? Let's try to hit a home run late in career here, and maybe you go get a Lamar Jackson and you really have to change your entire offense. I mean, it could be really interesting in New England this offseason as well.
Yeah.
So
plus, you can't be worse than what they had last year.
Yeah, it's all perspective there, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for that. Coming in, you don't want to be the guy that follows the really good guy. You want to be the guy that follows the really good guy.
It's true.
You come in after the letdown.